Here we go. Okay, so today we're going to talk about business names, state and city registration, a little bit about banking, and a very, very little bit about insurance. It's a bunch of like weird stuff put together. The next time I do this whole 11-week course, I'll probably put all of this stuff in with last week's, and then it'll be a full class session. But, you know, this is why we try things, right? Okay, business names. So a lot of y'all, and this varies depending on medium and a lot of things, a lot of y'all are just operating using your name as your sole proprietorship. That's fine. I'm not telling you not to do that, right? But if you don't want to do that, here's some things that you should do. And we'll talk about why in a couple slides and benefits. So the first thing when you're figuring out a business name that you want to do is Google it just to see what comes up, right? You don't want to pick something that is linked to like something that has a very similar or that exact name that's, you know, a porn site, but also things beyond that that are like any other business entities that have very different work or very similar work, right? That would be pretty bad, but also things that could connect you in some way to some political cause you really disagree with, that sort of thing. So you just want to Google the business name and see what comes up. Step one. Step two would be to do a state level name search via the Secretary of State's website. That will just get you if anyone has legally registered that business name within the state of Rhode Island, right? So this is not going to be required of sole proprietorships. This is not going to be required if you're just using your own legal name. Then I would purchase, claim, make accounts, right? And this is for both folks who are just using their name or a business name. Purchase the domain name, claim, and even if you're not going to use all of the social media, claim those names as best you can, just so somebody else can't be using it, so that when folks search for it, they find something else, right? Then, and there's a bunch of different domain name purchase versions out there. I don't have a favorite. I think the one I used most recently was just called something like Cheap Names. And you can usually buy the domain names for a year or two. Once you buy it, put it in your calendar to renew it. The name Cheap, yes. Put it in your calendar to renew it, because if you let your ownership of that domain name lapse, somebody else can claim it and your website might go down completely. Okay, then, and this is not, if you're a sole proprietorship or a general partnership, not just those pass-through entities, right? This is not mandatory, is registering your name with the Secretary of State. If you're going to be doing business as something other than your legal name, you probably should go ahead and register it with the Secretary of State, just so nobody else in the state of Rhode Island takes that name. And then everything is different city by city. So I looked at City of Providence because I know most of y'all are located there, even though I am not. But everything is different city to city, and you'll have to do it on a city by city basis. But if your business address is in the City of Providence, you do have to register with the Providence City Clerk, register your business name with the Providence City Clerk, even if you're a sole proprietor or a partnership without an LLC. If you do have an LLC, you do have to do a name registry with the Secretary of State. And then once you've done all those things, think about trademarking your business name, which would be a national protection. There's a lot of limitations around what you can and can't trademark, and you'll have to do a pretty robust search to make sure that it's not substantively similar to something else that's already trademarked. A lot of time, I usually just recommend talking to an IP lawyer and hiring an IP lawyer to do these name searches. More to come about trademarking and specifically trademarking business names during the session on intellectual property, in which an actual lawyer will be telling you about it and not me. Okay, that's name stuff.
Hey, Molly.
Hey, yeah.
If I become an LLC and I register my name with the Secretary of State, I don't have to do anything with the city clerk then, right? Is that kind of?
If you've already, no, you have to do both.
Okay, do it. All right.
Yeah. You will have to register with city clerk regardless of whether or not you register with Secretary of State. There's some details there about, like, in some cases, if you're like a corporation and you've registered with Secretary of State, you do not need to register with city clerk. Like, it's a little bit different for each one, but I think usually you do. And particularly when we start talking about business licenses and tax licenses, you will want to check out, particularly if you're in the city of Providence, depending on what you're doing, that kind of stuff. Other questions? Cool. Okay, what you will need to register your name is your business name, right? And you've already done all this work to make sure that it's not substantively like something else, right? That's in the state of Rhode Island or in the city. So this can be accomplished with a quick Google search. I would also do variations on your business name in the Secretary of State registry, because the substantive difference includes things like, if you have a business called Two Brothers Pizza and it's TWO, somebody else can't pick 2 the number, right? They probably also can't pick TOO or any other version of 2, right? It has to be different enough that folks can differentiate. And this is true for like national level trademark as well. A registered agent, which is typically you, and the registered agent's address. So you have to have a physical address. You have to be able to get mail there, and it cannot be a PO box or like a shipping center or something like that. It has to be a physical address where you can get mail. There's some local organizations that, if you're a member of them or provide that service, that they'll be your official business address. If you're a writer, I know for a fact that Whatshare Writers Club offers this to their members, which is great for folks who don't want their home address to be everywhere, or, you know, like I know there's a bunch of artists that like their mail isn't super dependable for some reason, so they have a PO box, and it gets into a whole layer of things. And you'll need to know what your business structure is, right? If you're just a sole proprietorship, if you're an LLC, or if you're something else. Okay, here's another name thing that you've probably all heard, which is a DBA, doing business as. This is for when you're doing business as something other than your legal name. So if you're an LLC, so for example, if I started a small arts consulting firm with 2 of my friends, Maggie and Todd, and we called it MTM Consulting, but we're a partnership, that's a pass-through entity, we don't legally need to register our name with Secretary of State, but we should get a DBA because that's our business name, right? So that we're not just doing business as Molly Flanagan. It's the difference between the legal name of your business and the name it operates under day to day. There's larger organizations that have DBAs. For example, the Steelyard is actually a DBA for something else. They go by the Steelyard now, but when they were originally formed, it's something long. So this isn't, and this, don't confuse this. This is just about the name. It's not a legal or tax business structure. It doesn't protect you in any way. It just sort of reserves the name. You're usually, and it's on a state and city basis. So you're usually filing for your DBA when you register your name with the city clerk. For Secretary of State, it's a separate form because sole proprietors aren't, yeah. And I'll put the links to all of these forms and like instructions in the website tomorrow. You will need a DBA, business name filing form from the city clerk to open a business bank account and to get a business loan most of the time. So it's generally a good idea. Okay. Registering, so that's naming stuff. Now registering your business entity, which is different than just reserving and registering the fact that your business has a name and that it exists, right? This is saying, I have a business, here it is, make sure it's all legal. So you need to register, you may or may not need to register at the state level depending on which entity you've chosen. If you're a sole proprietorship or a general partnership, you do not need to register at the state level. An LLC, an L3C, nonprofit, any of the other entities, any corporations, all need to file articles of incorporation and submit an annual report every year with the Secretary of State. The initial filing for LLCs is $150, and then the yearly reporting cost is $50. This does not include the $400 sales tax stuff we talked about yesterday or last week for LLCs. This is just the articles of incorporation and that you're a business entity. And all of this stuff is on the Secretary of State's website. And like I said last week, the Secretary of State's website is like relatively user-friendly as far as government websites go. Okay, business licenses. You probably do not need a state business license, depending on what you're doing, but probably I don't think any of you do. You might need a City of Providence business license, particularly if you're holding events, or if you're like a mobile vendor and doing mobile vending. This probably, I don't think this would apply to things like setting up with a group of artists in a gallery, for example, because that entity will have that event license, right? Not you. Same with like PVD Fest. I think, PVD Fest gets the event license, not the individual vendor. But like Providence Artisans Market at the Hope Street Farmers Market would have to have this entertainment and event license, right? As the thing that is doing that. If you're in a different city or town than Providence, check in that city and town because it varies. Yes, Rachel.
Hi, I'm sorry I was late, first of all. So I have a question. So I don't live in Providence, I live in Lincoln, but let's say I wanted to do art fair type thing in Providence. Do I need to check with Lincoln? That requires a business license number when you register. Do I need to check with Lincoln to see if that's where I would need to get the license, not in Providence, but I would be doing business in Providence? Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense, and I don't think I know the answer. I think it also depends on the event, but my guess is because your business address is in Lincoln, you would need your Lincoln business license, unless you're the host of the event, like having a bigger event, in which case you'd need like a one-time permit or one-time license.
And so where would you go if
I'm
you
not sure.
a one-time license?
Also city clerk's office.
City clerk's office. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and some of the special events licenses, particularly in the city of Providence, a lot of those special events permits are run through Arts, Culture, and Tourism. So the nice thing is when you're getting those, it's like I think Lizzie oversees those. So it's like a friendly face who understands arts and also is really good at her job, and will help you, right? So that's helpful. Not all cities have an arts department. Actually, I think Providence might be the only one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Lincoln does not.
Lincoln definitely does not. I think East Providence has an arts council, but I'm not sure if it's part of city government or if it's a separate entity. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. If you're, as we talked about last week, if you're selling physical stuff, you do need to register with the Department of Taxation to get a business license and a retail sales permit. And again, we'll talk about that. I'm gonna get an expert to talk about sales tax in another session. But the forms are online. Yes, Rachel.
Okay, so I couldn't wait, so I looked a bunch of that stuff up. And first of all, it was not as daunting as it seemed, but also there is such a thing as the nexus of filing in each state, and the threshold is like $100,000 or 100 separate objects within that state in order to have to file sales tax. So I felt a lot better.
That's great.
So yeah, if you're selling that much, then you can definitely figure it all out. And also there was a lot of plugins for website. Like I felt better because that conversation was a little daunting, but then after doing some research, I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure we're okay. So.
Yeah, none of you are like going to jail or owing thousands of dollars of back taxes, right? That's not what we're talking about. And like a lot of the e-commerce plugins and sites and things like Etsy will do sales tax for you, which is like, you know, Etsy has its problems, but particularly, and y'all are beyond, okay, y'all are beyond the point where you should be selling exclusively on Etsy, right? None of you are like hobbyists making stuff I could make, you know, like none of you are doing that. But if you're, you know, you want to ease a transition, Etsy does a lot of like, and those other sort of bigger platforms will figure out sales tax and just deal with it for you.
Yeah, WooCommerce had ones that you could do plugins that actually filed and everything for you. So it was good. So I just wanted to share that.
That's great. Yeah, and like all of this, it seems daunting until you break it down a little bit. Okay, does a business license include permission for events or entertainment, or is that an event by event date? It depends on the physical location and how frequently you're holding events. So if you know you're holding like a monthly series, or if you're a place that is a physical location that is just doing events, you can get a longer term license. But if you're just holding one event, you know, every now and then, you'll need an event license for every single thing. So like last year when we did an event at the Steel Yard that was in the night and there was music, we had to get a permit just for that event, right? That being said, depending on the venue, they probably know exactly how to do it and are good at it, right? Because Steel Yard, like, they have an events person on their staff and he just did it for us because that's part of his job. But yeah, so the answer is not cut and dry. The answer is it depends on exactly what you're doing. Check with the city. And this information about those event licenses and stuff, it's all on the city clerk's website. Some of it is on special event licenses, which is through Arts, Culture, and Tourism within the city of Providence. So there's like two things. But because Arts, Culture, and Tourism, particularly in Providence, is so deeply engaged in that process of licensing events and that sort of stuff, they know more about this than something like RISCA, where we don't. That's not a normal part. Like producing and supporting special events is not a part of our operations. Okay, we're gonna be way under an hour today. I'm so sorry, y'all. I feel like I'm shortchanging you, but last week and this week should be one. Okay, questions about naming and registering in the state of Rhode Island that haven't already been asked?
I guess that doing business as, so would I just be Jennifer DeGagny doing business as Mila Soul Handmade?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to like figure out the reason for that. It just seems.
Some of it is just so you can like claim that business name, right? So nobody else can use it. Some of it is to protect your personal information and so that you can get a business bank account and a EIN that's separate so you don't have to use your social security number on everything.
Okay.
Let's go with Jim first.
Did you
Sorry.
Go ahead, that's fine. I was just curious as to why, or if you know why in the city of Providence, a sole proprietorship would need to register with the city clerk.
No idea why, and it just says it on their website. And then once you sort of click in, it says specifically like sole proprietorships and partnerships need to do this. But then it's like a similar form as the name registration at the state level, which is more about like DBA style stuff. So I don't know why, I just know that you need to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Rachel or Serena? Which one of you wants to go first?
Here, I'll
Rachel.
go. Mine's really fast. So my full name is Rachel Swan White, but I show under R Swan White, which is just my name only shortened. Is that still considered doing business as, but I already have an EIN and a business bank account. So does it really matter? I don't think it really matters, particularly if you're just rocking it as a sole proprietor. Yeah, I'm going to stick there. Okay, thanks.
That was a similar question that I had, because I just am Serena Mitchell Art. So would I be worried about a DBA? Because my business is basically my name.
But it's not your name, right? Because your legal name is Serena Mitchell and your business name is Serena Mitchell Art.
I guess so.
Yeah, I think if you run up to stuff and want to do a DBA for whatever reason, do it. But you can just be Serena Mitchell, I think.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff about, like one of the things that will hopefully change in the next 10 to 15 years, but is very true right now, is that all of these business regulations and stuff have not been made for y'all, right? They've been made for restaurants and manufacturing businesses and barbershops and all of the small business examples that Commerce and the governor give during their speeches about how we need to save the small business community, right? None of these regulations are written for single member sole proprietors, like actual really small businesses. I'm hoping as the economy moves towards a gig economy, and as we push to support small businesses, and also as a lot of these issues and inequities have been laid bare during the pandemic in small business relief funding, and the challenges for sole proprietors, that will change. But that level of policy is going to be a slow road. Like, it's such a big boat to turn. But that's one of the many policy things that I have been working on for a while, but I'm now much more focused on, because I want to ensure y'all's access to small business relief funding right now and over the next year. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things is y'all live in a lot of gray area around these things because of the nature of what you do and the size of your business. And that none of these regulations were written for y'all. And they were also for the most part, the people at the other end of the phone are not going to understand what you're doing. We're working on that at a state government level. Yeah.
I just wanted to add one more thing, which was about the city clerk thing. Because if you go to the city clerk of Providence website, for example, it says you have to register your business with them, but it doesn't provide a link to do so. So I'm guessing you'd have to call and ask, because the link they provide is actually to the BAR form, which is the business, I think, application and registration form. And that's for the Rhode Island Division of Taxation.
Yes.
So I think you might have to just call the Providence City clerk and be like, hi, how do I do this? Because there's no like online form for it.
And as things get smaller and you get down to a city level, stuff gets like, you're more likely to get a small staff that's actually reachable, that actually knows what they're doing, right? This is one nice thing about living in Rhode Island is like coming from, you know, larger states, it's more likely that like I can get to a person who actually knows what's going on, even within state government, and it's never the boss, right? It's never the boss. But I mean, like, that's not their job to know the details, right? But yeah, anyway, being in a small state and doing stuff at the city level is always going to be easier than the larger bureaucratic institutions because you can get to the actual person. Okay, banking. So I strongly, strongly recommend having a separate bank account for your business than for your personal work, than your personal life, right? Even if you're like a performing artist and you're just getting like gig pay, having a separate bank account where even if you're just like flowing through and paying yourself an income, that way just having all of the expenses for the business and all the income for the business in one place legitimizes you if you ever get audited, right? You probably won't, but if you do. And it also just helps you with bookkeeping and keeping things separate and knowing what's happening in your business life, right? So things don't get all mangled up. Also, if you're not great at bookkeeping during the year, as I revealed that I was not when I was a working artist, having everything be in a separate bank account makes it much easier and cleaner to go back through your bank statements and be like, oh yeah, I spent that money, I gotta find that receipt, rather than like having Amazon orders of like an air filter for your house mixed in with like a brand new crescent wrench, right? So I also recommend, and this is also deeply, deeply informed by working with folks as they went through the payroll protection program loan process with the SBA this year, that smaller and local is better. The folks that I know that did get PPP loans, both nonprofits and individual artists, had a much better time customer service wise and were much more likely to actually get the loan if they had a smaller local bank, right? When you're picking your bank, make sure they're an SBA preferred lender, because then if you need something like a PPP loan, hopefully nobody ever, you know, like hopefully we don't ever have a crisis like this again, but you know, the SBA also underwrites a lot of other small, very small business loans, micro business loans, more risky small business startup loans that go through private lenders where they're an underwriter, but you need to go through an SBA preferred lender. Most of the local banks are, like Bank Newport is, Navigant is, like most of them are, but just check. A lot of them will say right on their business banking website, the SBA also has a list. Make sure that they offer a business credit card. In case you want to buy stuff with a credit card, make sure they have a business lending program. And then the most important part of this and everything else is do what actually works for you and what makes you comfortable, right? So if you have an existing relationship with your personal bank and you really like them, just get a business account there, right? Do what's gonna work for you over what I say. Okay, insurance. My whole slide is gonna get an expert, sorry. So for your business itself, y'all probably do not need any insurance for your business, right? You might want to look into if you're putting your art in a gallery, you always want to ask the gallery if they have insurance for the artworks that are up in the gallery. If they do, they'll have a form that you need to fill out, right, when they intake that includes like the amount, the valuation of it. So for example, my colleague Elena Calderon Patino runs a art gallery in the first floor of the government building that we're in, right? So we have a blanket policy that covers all of the artwork that goes up in there, but you have to say what the amount is. Some art galleries do have this, some do not. A lot of the like university galleries do, many of the smaller galleries don't. You can get your own insurance, and then public art is a whole different animal. That's a whole complex thing. If you're making larger public art pieces, you are going to want to work with whoever's commissioning you or giving you permission, because you'll need more, because it's something physical that people can interact with in the real world. You'll need more insurance in case somebody hurts themselves, right? Either installing it or in it in general. Health and, like I'm not going to go deep into like health insurance and that kind of stuff, because y'all know how to do that now. And if you don't, we'll talk about it. But it's like, it's so much easier now than it was when I was freelancing, because Obamacare exists and there's a statewide exchange. Like that did not happen. That was not in existence when I was freelancing. So there's a lot of different kinds of insurance, because you're not providing services that are super risky or that you could be super liable for. You probably don't need any sort of liability insurance. If you're doing events and that sort of thing, you'll want if you're the like main organizer, if your name is on the hook there, you'll want insurance for the event as well. So there's like 5 zillion different kinds of insurance. It's super complicated, and a lot of insurance agents do not understand the kind of insurance y'all need. So one of the things that I'm going to work on is getting an expert, or if not an expert, at least like somebody or several somebodies that I can recommend for like public art, for insuring artwork in galleries and public spaces, and for event stuff. Yes? Okay, it's 4:36 and we've reached the end of my like actual topic slides and just have like what's coming up. So do y'all have questions? Is there something you want to talk about? What can I help you with this week before I tell you all the stuff that's coming up in the next week? Cool. Resounding silence. All right, here's what is coming up in the next week or so that might be helpful for y'all. Tomorrow, Rhode Island SBA has a webinar called Key Legal Considerations for Small Businesses During COVID. Excuse me. And then also tomorrow, GuideStar, and this is more aimed at the 2 to 3:30 is more aimed at nonprofits and nonprofit arts and culture orgs, but how grant makers in the arts are addressing current challenges. And this is from a non-arts national group. So I will be virtually at both of those, but those are both coming up in the next week and might be interesting. City of Providence and LISC Rhode Island just announced micro business grants of up to $10,000 for low income Providence business owners. That includes single member sole proprietors, right? It's specifically for very small businesses. There's I think the application opens on the 28th. It's sometime next week. And they're going to go fast. I think the pot of money is pretty small, but there's a sort of overview application guide session on Thursday from 5 to 6 p.m. And then the Restore RI grant program from Commerce, which is ever expanding and simplifying, which is great, but is still pretty steep. it's doubled the amounts you're eligible for and expanded to include nonprofits this week, officially starting today. They are having some office hours where you can just sign into Zoom and get some help from Commerce staff Thursday at 2 and Friday at 1. And the links, direct Zoom links, are on the Restore RI website, which is there. I hope that y'all will apply for a Restore RI grant. To help you apply for a Restore RI grant, RISCA, I am hosting a webinar with the member of Commerce's staff, not the boss, but the one who actually really, really knows and deeply understands the Restore RI grants, Kara, who is a policy advisor at Commerce, on Thursday at noon. It will be like RISCA is hosting it. It's just for the arts and culture sector. I've already started sending her some arts specific questions. She's going to come having thought about eligible expenses that are specific to folks in the arts field. So I strongly recommend coming to that on Thursday. I'll be there. I'll be moderating the Q&A. Then also on Thursday, I have open office hours. Come by. Monday next week, oh, there's a typo in that one. At 10 a.m., RISCA is presenting a panel as part of National Arts and Humanities Month called Adapting to the Pandemic Through an Equity Lens. So we have 4 artists and arts administrators from Rhode Island and a moderator who's also an artist from Rhode Island, talking about the adaptations they and their organizations have made to continue to make work and stay in touch with people and provide programming during the pandemic with an eye to equity. So the moderator is Janaea Kizzy, who was most recently the Arts and Culture Fellow at Rhode Island Council for the Humanities. She's wonderful. She's also a writer. She used to co-direct Frequency Writers. She's phenomenal. And then the panelists are Lydia Perez, who is a performing artist and also runs Puerto Rican Institute for Arts and Advocacy. She's a wonderful dancer, singer, performer. She also does some visual art. Somebody from the Rhode Island Department of Education that's working on multilingual ed services. Flavia is her name. Silver Moon LaRose, who is an artist, but also is the associate director at the Tamaqua Museum. So she'll be talking both about her personal art practice and she does a lot of teaching artist work too. And then also the work Tamaqua Museum has done to adapt to virtual programming. And Janine Chartier, who runs what was formerly, now the name I can't remember, now it's called Arts Equity in Rhode Island. And it's supporting folks with a variety of disabilities in art making. So it'll be really cool. I'm excited. And then I've brought back every other week peer support calls. So the first one is the Restore RI grant info. The next one will be on the 5th, and it will be about how artists are documenting the pandemic. The facilitator will be Nafis White. There's 2 more after that every other week, but I didn't tag them all here because they're far away. But there'll be one about how to set up a good like virtual workspace. So how to set up your physical workspace to teach, perform, rehearse, have good meetings where you look good. And then there's one on artist mental health from some folks who have been doing a lot of like yoga and meditation practices and teaching and are certified in those things, all led by artists that are local to Rhode Island. And that's what I've got for today. It's not that much. We made it 43 whole minutes. What else can I help y'all with?
Okay. Oh, sorry. Are we raising our hands or just jumping in?
Whatever works for y'all.
Okay.
It was the teacher in me, the former teacher. I used to raise my hand. Sorry. You go first.
Okay, so my question is, the form that is sort of joint between RISCA and the Rhode Island Taxation Department, that's like the art exemption works. Is there anyone from RISCA who understands how that works and how it should be filled out, who could maybe come and tell us about it? I was looking and I'm not
Yes
sure.
and yes.
Okay, cool. Like if you fill it out before or after you make the sale, or how that works.
Before you make the sale. So it's with the sort of sales tax permitting. And Randy, my boss, is the one who deeply understands that, right? It's a boss who deeply understands a program and nobody else does. But we're, there's us, we're also small and we're different. We like to know things at RISCA and be helpful. And he will be talking about that for y'all. So yes and yes, it's already been planned.
Woo! Thank you.
Rachel.
So my question is about the Restore Rhode Island grants.
Okay.
So okay. Lots of questions.
They're a beast and their documentation is not great.
And it's what, like $2,500 roughly? Is that correct?
Now it's 5,000. They doubled the amount you can get officially today.
And so is that based on like your income from your previous tax term year? Is it based on, are you proposing something? Like, how is that working? Also, is that taking money away from other artists? Like, I have a roof over my head, I have food. Like, I don't want to take money from somebody that doesn't have that.
Okay. So I'll answer both of those. First thing, it's not taking away money from other artists. They have a good chunk of money. I want to make sure artists get that money. Not a lot have yet, but it's not like a competitive grant program like the Artist Relief Fund where there was so much less money than there was need. It's not like that. So please apply. The amount of grant money that you can get is based on, and this is really unclear from their website and from all of the documentation that they have. So I'm not surprised you have this question, but the amount of grant money you can get, the maximum is based on number of FTE, full-time equivalent staff people you have, which is 1, right? It's you. So that gives you the ceiling of $5,000. Then to get up to $5,000, you have to be able to show expenses between, I think it's middle of March and December 1st of this year, that are specific to like COVID adaptation or are fixed expenses. And those things cannot have been paid for by other federal relief programs. So if you got a PPP loan, you can't double dip in that funding stream. So you can't use PPP money and use those same expenses for this. So this is things like, and some of the difficulty with them is like they've excluded in-home offices and in-home studios. So you can't use those deductions. But if you have a studio somewhere else, you can use that. If you have other fixed expenses or things like your whatever fees you're paying for your website, if you're the member of SNAG, right? Society of North American Goldsmiths, right? If you have professional affiliations or subscriptions to things.
What about the expenses associated with an exhibition that went on during that time frame? Because that's not a fixed expense and it's not totally COVID related.
Probably not unless you can really spin it to be adapting to COVID.
No, I can't.
So if you need to beef up your website, pay somebody to set up some e-commerce stuff, studio memberships would definitely count. Things like if you're a member of Wet Chair Writers Club, that would count. If you are a ceramicist and you book time in a kiln regularly, that would probably count as a fixed income, right? Fixed expense. So it's either COVID adaptation specific. So this could also include things like, I need better lighting and sound in order to have Zoom meetings or teach classes or do rehearsals or whatever. that would count as a COVID related business adaptation.
So do you have to have already done that, or are you applying for the money in order to do that? So let's say
Either.
because I think, I'm guessing all of us are facing the prospect. I never really sold myself. I always let the galleries do it, but now I'm selling myself. So hiring somebody to do all the WooCommerce would be delightful, and I would love that. So I can put in a grant with the proposal costs. Is that what
Yep.
you're saying?
As long as you know how much it's going to be and you're going to spend the money before December 1st.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right? It's like there's some time pressure. But if there's stuff y'all need to adapt to COVID to make your businesses work, apply for a Restore RI grant and Rachel, I would have talked to a website designer and gotten a quote and send them the quote, right? But definitely come to the webinar on Thursday at noon, because Kara and I have talked specifically about this kind of stuff, and she actually knows, and she's interested in the arts, so she kind of speaks the language more than anybody else at Commerce, and is really wants to support artists in getting this. So she's ready to have these more detailed conversations.
Thank you.
Where can we see that link again for the Thursday at noon?
I will put it in the chat. And then it's also in the Artists and Creatives of Rhode Island Facebook group, and it's been posted on RISCA's Facebook page. So it's also in a couple places. Cats are being a little nutsy. Just making sure we have a window cracked, and I'm like, oh, is the screen closed? Or can he just jump out right into the parking lot? Screen's closed, we're good. Yeah, the Restore RI grants are complex, but there is money there for you to spend on things that you might need or do need and have never been able to pay for before, like website design. They also have another grant that was announced last week, and I think the applications are opening tomorrow. That it's like what I'll be doing with the rest of my evening is seeing if the guidelines still say draft on them. They're doing their best over at Commerce, but it's a little rocky. Called business adaptation grants, which are larger. They're up to $50,000. And it's for the same thing. So if you need a new computer, if you need a new microphone, if you need new things to adapt your business in a larger way, you can apply for that funding, right? That application opens tomorrow. And it's Kara is the actual person who knows what's going on with both of those. So she'll be able to talk about that on Thursday too. But yeah, I mean, if your computer isn't keeping up with virtual things and you need that, that's a COVID adaptation.
And Molly, when's the deadline for that grant, the Restore?
There is not a hard deadline to apply. It's they're accepting applications till they run out of money. That being said, you have to have spent the money by December 1st. So getting it in sooner is better. The business adaptation, and I don't know if there's a cap on how much money they have in the Restore RI program. If there is, they're not close to it yet. Right, they're pushing it out as fast as they can because they are not close to it. The business adaptation grant does have a cap of 1.8 million, so it will go a little faster. Particularly since it's larger grants. And if y'all are affiliated with any nonprofits, both of those are now open to nonprofits. But there's some FTE restrictions, like Trinity Rep cannot apply for the Restore RI grant because they have more than 50 full-time equivalent staff members. Cool. Other questions, thoughts, needs? What do you all need from me in the next week?
I don't know what else what was planned for next week?
Next week, we're going to start talking about budgeting and basic finances. And then the week after that, I'm just opening this to make sure that I'm telling you the right thing. Okay, yes. So next week is budgeting and bookkeeping. And then the week after that is taxes, which will include sales tax and some stuff about e-commerce. It's going to be fun. I'm going to get somebody else to teach. All right, y'all. Yeah, and if you need anything, you know, email me if you have any outstanding questions or about this or anything else, let me know. And then, or drop into my office hours on Thursday. But thank you all. It's nice to see your faces and see your names.
Thank you.
Thank you.